Ah, yes, deadly struggles within the Roman Republic. This isn't quite what it seems, though. These aren't military struggles, but in fact political ones.
The first thing to note is the two political factio, or factions. These were the populares who wanted to help the regular people. They got the power slash votes from peasants. On the other side were the optimates. These guys represented the rich people. They already had power. In fact, they already controlled the Senate. They didn't want to lose their power to the populares because the optimates wanted to keep that power. Nevertheless, some bloody confrontations arose. One question that might rise up when you're thinking about these two parties is what were the two people that they were representing like? Well, the populares represented the poor people. They were called the plebeians. The most famous and dangerous types of plebeian was the peasants that used to labor on the large farms. But the owners of these farms found labor to be cheaper by buying slaves. They found themselves without jobs on the streets of the big city. Other than that, the plebeians were just common folk, plain and simple. A shopkeeper was a plebeian, crafters like masons and blacksmiths were plebeians. Even a skilled worker might be a plebeian. On the other hand were the optimates. They were the really rich. People who owned tens if not hundreds of farms, generals of the army, and people who owned large estates and were in the Senate were the optimates. They were around before the populares. These types of people were called the patricians. If they were in modern times, they would be the 1%, but not the philanthropist 1%, the greedy and ungiving part of the 1%. Like any great rivalry, there were champions on both sides of the party, using speeches and also bloody confrontations to beat each other.
The Gracchi brothers, or Tiberius Gracchus and Gaius Gracchus, commonly known as the Gracchi, were Roman political reformers who both became influential plebeian tribunes. A tribune is essentially like the president. He was elected by the people, or the populus Romanus, and he could veto anything in the Senate or the plebeian council. And if he was attacked, the attacker would be punished to death. The Gracchi were sons of Tiberius Sempronius Gracchus, twice consul and a censor. A censor is a magistrate who held censuses and set public morals. Their mother was the daughter of Scipo Africanus, the conqueror of Hannibal. Needless to say, the Gracchus brothers belonged to one of the most distinguished families in Rome. Surprisingly, both boys were aligned with the Popularis party, and their attempts at reforms brought them to collision with the senatorial Optimaris party, who conspired to ociado, or kill them. In fact, Tiberius got killed by an angry mob at Capitol Hill, as seen in the picture on the screen. Gaius was the first Roman to demonstrate how a successful general could achieve political power by gaining personal allegiance of his soldiers. Marius was born to a son of a farmer in 157 BC. As a young man, he became tribune of the people, and in 115 BC, at the age of 42, a praetor. Soon after, trouble erupted in North Africa, and he made a name for himself as an army officer in what became known as the Jugurthine War. While this conflict was in progress, he began instituting military reforms, such as dropping all property qualifications and accepting volunteers from all classes. This greatly increased the number of potential recruits, but also produced a more permanent force. Through various different perks, including generous land allotments to his veterans, Marius was able to keep his troops fiercely loyal to him. In fact, the troops were more loyal to him than they were to the state. Marius's army enjoyed many victories. Through these victories, he remained the most powerful and feared Roman general for a long time. But eventually, his position was challenged by Sulla, who in recent years had attained much power and prestige of his own. In 87 BC, while Sulla was campaigning in Asia Minor, Marius led his troops into Rome and murdered many of Sulla's aristic supporters. At age 71, Marius, now an old man, died of natural causes. Although Marius had many great achievements, one of the many things that made Marius so remarkable is the fact that he was a novus homo, or a new man. He was given this distinction because he didn't have the usual qualifications of a senator and achieved his power through force, not birthright. Lucius Cornelius Sulla, known by his cognomen, or third name, Sulla, was the greatest rival of Gaius Marius. Born into a patrician family, Sulla made a name for himself in the Jugurthine War. He was elected consul in 88 BC and returned from Asia Minor in 83 BC. On his return, Sulla fought the populist faction and took the city by force. He then acquired office of dictator and conducted a bloody purge of his political enemies. These purges were called proscriptions. Sulla created proscriptions as a mean of disposing his enemies, also known as the supporters of Marius. He posted lists of those he wanted killed, and they were killed. The properties of the proscribed were confiscated and sold, and those who killed or revealed the whereabouts of the proscribed were rewarded. The proscribed individuals were called proscripti. The whole process was completely legal as the Senate passed a law granting Sulla this power. Sulla instituted these proscriptions in order to avenge the massacres by Gaius Marius. Some 520 wealthy opponents of Sulla were proscribed and their property were given to Sulla's veterans. Sulla, not to be outdone by Marius, died of natural causes after he retired to a private life. Pompey, or Canisius Pompeius Magnus, was born into a family of moderate distinction in Rome. He conducted a series of decisive campaigns in Spain which brought him some recognition. However, in 62 BC, Pompey had to return to Rome to get his agreements ratified by the Senatus, or Senate, and get rewards to his soldiers. He had little experience in senatorial politics and discovered that the Senate tended to unite against powerful individuals, such as himself. Pompey's political program was soon in trouble, and he had to turn to Crassus and Julius Caesar. Caesar used his own skill as well as Pompey's and Crassus's resources to pass the bills that Pompey wanted. Following this watershed event, Pompey enjoyed 7 years as part of the first triumvirate. This was until he became jealous of Caesar, which led to his demise. Pompey died while fleeing from Caesar. He hoped to find asylum in Egypt, but instead the Egyptian king killed him in fear of angering Caesar.